Hi everyone, Paul here from FamilyWheels.ca with another car review for your growing family. And if you're looking for a pint-sized yet modestly off-road capable vehicle, then the subcompact crossover segment could be just for you. This includes the likes of the Honda HR-V, the Nissan Juke, the Mazda CX-3, there's the Jeep Renegade which came out a couple of years ago, Toyota has its version and the CHR coming out for 2018, so it's getting to be a fairly crowded segment, but one of the original players was the Subaru Crosstrek. We're in one this week thanks to the folks at Subaru Calgary. This vehicle is meant to give you just that little bit more ground clearance, slightly more rugged styling than the similarly sized Impreza in the company's lineup, but it hasn't seen a lot of changes since it was first released. However, that's going to change for 2018 because there's a brand new version of this car coming out. It was released at the Geneva Auto Show earlier this month. A lot of people buzzing about it. My big questions here this week are, is this enough car? Is it going to be big enough? We're going to meet up with a friend of mine who's had one for a couple of years now with his family. We'll see what he thinks about it. We're also going to compare this to what's coming for 2018 and the Impreza to see how it stacks up to that brand new version of that vehicle as well. It's all this week right here on Family Wheels. Well, the Crosstrek's been with us here in Canada since 2013, and along the way we dropped the Crosstrek XV name. Now it's just called the Crosstrek. Last year, in 2016, there was what's called a mid-cycle refresh, where we got a new front end to kind of sharpen up the looks of this vehicle. We got some new interior features, but the drivetrain, the underbelly of this car really hasn't changed at all since it was first introduced. We're not seeing many changes for 2017 because we've got that brand new version of the Crosstrek coming in the 2018 model year. Couple little things you can look for this year though. We've got the introduction of the Kazan edition. It gives you this fire engine red Crosstrek with some black accents if you're looking to stand out from the crowd just a little. We also have the introduction of blind spot monitoring in all Crosstreks in the sport and limited trims. Now, north of the border here in Canada, we actually have different trims available to us than you do south of the border. So you have the touring trim as the base model at 25 grand, then the sport trim, and then the limited trim that I'm in here this week. Now it starts up here in Canada at 25 grand plus taxes, and you're getting the same 2-liter 4-cylinder non-turbo boxer engine in all Crosstreks, no matter what trim you choose. It doesn't have the same kind of excitement or life that some of the other cars in this segment have. A lot of vehicles are choosing, or manufacturers are choosing to go to turbo engines to give you that extra little bit of boost and bit of sportiness in these smaller 4-cylinders, and that might do just the trick here in the Crosstrek. One thing I really like about the Crosstrek is that all trims of this vehicle come with a 5-speed manual transmission. We've got the CVT on board here this week, which is going to cost you extra on top of that price, but it is also going to suck some of the power out of this vehicle. I think that if you want to make it feel a little bit sportier, you're certainly going to get a little bit more of that when you're driving this around with that 5-speed manual. Cool to see that that's being offered in the Crosstrek because a lot of the competitors aren't even making that a choice. Of course, it also has Subaru's amazing all-wheel drive system, one of the best in the industry, really only rivaled by Audi's Quattro system. And if you're driving a lot in these Canadian winters, this is going to bring a lot of confidence to your driving. But unlike the Impreza, which I was finding was just a little bit low to the ground when I was driving it a few weeks ago, I was getting bogged down at times in this really sort of loose, mashed potato-y like snow that was around. We have a lot more ground clearance here in the Crosstrek, 220 millimeters of it. And in fact, that's exactly the same amount of ground clearance as you're going to find in the Outback and the Forester. So it's a lot of it, and it means that you can very happily bounce your way down an old side road on the weekends, but you still got a smaller package here for, you know, easy parking in the city and a little bit more fuel efficient as well. Speaking of fuel efficiency, we've averaged this week about 8.4 liters per 100 kilometers. That's right in the middle of what Subaru says you should average, and considering that we do have, you know, a slightly larger hatch at play here, we have all-wheel drive, and we've got that extra ground clearance, I'm really pleased with that fuel efficiency. Rounding out the base $25,000 price tag here in the Crosstrek is a rear backup camera, heated front seats. We have roof rails, so it's really easy to put a roof rack on this car for, you know, bikes and ski racks and all that kind of thing, which a lot of Subaru owners are going to want to put on. And then we also have a 6.2-inch infotainment system. And I like the infotainment system from Subaru. It's pretty easy to navigate through, and I just in general really like the way that this system has integrated both manual knobs and some more old school physical knobs as well. Here in this limited trim we have dual zone climate control, and while I do have physical knobs to adjust that, it also reads out the temperature that I've selected here on the infotainment system. So it's kind of a nice hybrid, unlike the Outback, which seems to have kind of two separate systems altogether on the go, and it means that it's a more cluttered front dashboard than we see here in the Crosstrek. I think that the Crosstrek could actually teach the Outback, its much larger, more expensive sibling, a thing or two in terms of just cleaning up the interior. The Crosstrek seats are okay, but they're not hugely comfortable. The big issue with them is that they're not very adjustable. I can't adjust the height as much as I'd like, so I'm 6'2", and I really like to be able to put the seats down a little bit lower because I'm just about out of headroom here up front. We also don't have any lumbar support adjustments, so you can't fiddle around with that. And even though I am in the limited trim here this week, I have to adjust everything manually. There's no automatic or, you know, motorized seat adjustment function here in the Crosstrek. And while I do like the fact that this car has that extra bit of ground clearance, and it does corner quite nicely too, I was expecting it maybe to bob through the corners a little bit, but I've actually had a fair bit of fun here in the Crosstrek. The downside to that is that it also is a fairly harsh ride. So if you've got big potholes down your back alley, or even, you know, just the seams in the road here this week, I'm feeling all of them. It's a fairly sensitive ride here in this car. And if I am talking just a little bit louder than usual, it's because our decibel reader test revealed that this is a pretty noisy car. At 100 kilometers an hour on the same stretch of road we always use, I hit 67 decibels, and that certainly puts it on the louder end here on the interior. Now the mid-range level of the Crosstrek gives you that blind spot monitoring that I was talking about. It gives you a sunroof. It gives you improved HID headlights, but they're still not that good. You know, compare this to the competition, some of which has LED headlamps now, and they're certainly much brighter and better for nighttime driving. We also in the sport trim get the addition of this leather-wrapped steering wheel. I like the orange stitching throughout this car. I think that it makes it look kind of cool and sporty, but the feel of this steering wheel is really cheap. The leather does not feel very high quality, and since, you know, steering wheels just by default are such touchstones for a vehicle because you're touching them so much as you're cruising along the road, I think that this could be improved upon just a little bit. Here in this limited trim, which starts just shy of $30,000, we have very tough leather seating surfaces. I like this leather for this car. You know, it doesn't feel like it's going to nick up really easily, and since it is a more outdoor-minded vehicle, it's a good choice. It's not the most supple, but I think it fits for this car. We have that dual zone climate control. We have a larger touch screen and infotainment system at 7 inches. And if you want to add around an extra $2,500 on top of the sport or limited trim pricing, you can get Subaru's EyeSight system, which I really believe is one of the best that's out there. We don't have it here on this tester that I'm driving right now, but I've driven it in the Outback and I've driven it in the Forester, and it uses 2 cameras, a stereo image, to stitch together the road up ahead. This gives you one of the best forward collision mitigation braking systems out there. Same for adaptive cruise control, lane keep assist. The only downside to going with the EyeSight system here in the Subaru is that you have to get it with the continuously variable transmission. It's not a choice when you're getting this with the manual 5-speed. By the way, Subaru has really upped its game in the safety department over the last couple of years. The Forester, the Outback, the Impreza, and the Crosstrek all have top marks from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. This has a top safety pick rating. The top safety pick plus rating is one step up above that, and the Crosstrek is hoping to get that for its latest 2018 remodel of this car coming out in the summer. Well, the back seat here in the Crosstrek is a pleasant surprise. I was kind of expecting to be jammed in back here much more than I am. I look at that Jeep Renegade that we were in about a year and a half ago, and it was a pretty unusable second row. But here, I'm 6'2", and I've got about 2 inches of extra headroom, and my legroom, I mean, it's not great, but it's certainly usable. I've adjusted the driver's seat for a driver who's about 6 feet tall. I'm 6'2" sitting back here, and my knees are just starting to brush up against the back seat. The Crosstrek has about 900 millimeters of rear seat legroom, and then you compare that to the Honda CR-V, which is in the next class up in terms of the crossover segment for size, and that has just over 1,000 millimeters of legroom, and that's best in class. Once you look at car seats, front-facing, not an issue, but it's rear-facing that's a bit more of a problem, and that's because if you do flip the seats around, front passengers are going to be squeezed. Your legroom's not bad. We've got about 10 inches of legroom according to our measuring tape, although I do feel still fairly squeezed in up there when I have flipped the car seats around. But it's the headroom that's the real problem. I'm just jammed in. I wouldn't be able to get comfortable with a rear-facing car seat in place, so younger families might have a hard time here in the Crosstrek until they flip that car seat around. Otherwise, the second row, pretty basic. There's no plug-in point for USB ports. There are no heated seats back here, even in this limited trim that we're driving around in. But I am pleased that we don't have perforated leather seats here in this vehicle. There aren't ventilated seats as an option, even in the front row. So it means that all those perforations would just be for looks. But Subaru, they held back. They didn't do that. And it means that for families, it's going to be a lot easier to clean up. Now here at the trunk end of the Crosstrek, we're going old school this week with a manual lift gate. That's on all trims of this vehicle, unlike the Forester or the Outback where you get one of those auto lift gates on the higher trims. But some people are going to like the fact that this is a bit more simple because those lift gates in some of the Forester and Outback models, it is getting better, but they can be rather glacial. This way, it's nice and simple. Once we open up the trunk, it reveals 632 liters of trunk capacity, which sounds pretty good. It's better than the Impreza's 589 liters, but I actually found the Impreza's trunk to be far more usable. We look at our standardized trunk test here of a stroller, a diaper bag, a couple bags of groceries, a backpack, and a soccer ball, and it reveals it's a fairly tight squeeze, and that's because the stroller couldn't fit lengthwise. Instead, it had to go across like this because it's just not a very deep trunk. And that means that if you've got other items, a family dog you want to try and squeeze back there with all this stuff, it's really not going to happen. Another issue that I have with the Crosstrek is that because this is oriented toward more outdoor-minded people, it doesn't have a rear pass-through into the second row. So if you're, say, carrying a pair of skis, you can only travel with 3 passengers if those skis are inside with you, because you'd have to use up the 60 on the 60-40 rear split in order for those skis to fit. Speaking of family dogs, a lot of people who own Crosstreks and Subarus tend to own dogs as well, and one issue I've got here is that the sill is rather high on this trunk. The pooch might have a bit of a hard time getting into the back of the Crosstrek. So Jay, last time I saw you on the channel anyway was when we were driving the Fiat 500X.
That's right.
Remember that thing?
I do, yeah.
And actually a bit of an underrated car. It's been a bit of a flop, but I kind of liked it.
You definitely tested it hard when you had it, for sure.
We drove that thing through some hard side roads for sure. But now we're in the car that you actually own.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, as a family man, your thoughts on the car?
Well, we got it specifically for a car that was going to be good on the roads like Subarus traditionally are, and as well as something that's, you know, economical on fuel. And so far, those two things fit the bill. I know with having the rear-facing seat in the back seat, right behind the passenger seat, it's pretty tight up front, and then it's pretty tight for the cargo space as well. But I mean, we knew that going into it. That's kind of class of the Crosstrek, so you know, I kind of expected it, right?
Do you think in the future, if you could do it again, would you go for a larger vehicle, or can this be a practical choice for family?
Personally, I wanted to go for a larger vehicle kind of off the get, and Janelle really liked the size of the car. So, I mean, I guess it really depends who you ask. She likes it bombing around the city and stuff. Super easy to park, and yeah, she absolutely loves it. If you would have 2 kids, I think it would be too tight. But with 1 kid, we can squeeze everything in there, and it's not too bad. It's a little tight for the passenger seat, but yeah, it can fit all the gear in the back and stuff. So
You've made it work.
yeah.
You know, it's funny, this week I was kind of mentally preparing myself before I got into the Crosstrek to say, yeah, it's still a good car, but it's getting long in the tooth and it's due for a redesign. But to be honest, if I didn't know that a new version of this car was coming out for 2018, I'd say that it was very contemporary and still holding up really well to the competition that's out there. I like the Crosstrek. It's not very exciting to drive, but it does give you amazing versatility. And it really does look like this car is going to get nothing but better for 2018. Subaru Calgary and dealerships right across the country are expecting the new 2018 Crosstrek to show up midsummer sometime. It's going to be based on the same global design platform as the Impreza, and that means that its handling is going to be even better than ever. Its fuel economy is going to be better than ever. It's going to be safer than ever. The exterior and interior styling is going to be brightened up that much more. It's going to have an 8-inch touchscreen infotainment system standard on all trims. It's got a lot going on for 2018, but you know what? I still say that if you're not looking for the latest and greatest and you want to maybe save a little bit of money at the dealership, because I imagine there might be some incentives coming out for this 2017 Crosstrek, this could still be a really good car to look at. And the next time I see you, I guess we're on a bit of a Subaru kick right now because we're in another car supplied by Subaru Calgary. It's the rally-inspired, heritage-filled WRX. I'm really keen to see how that one does for families. That's in about 7 days from now. Until then, have a great week.